My name is Holla. I am 24 years old. And on March 23, 2019, I died in my father's palace, in front of 12 security guards who swore they watched me take my last breath. But that's not where this story ends. It's where it begins. Let me take you back to a world most people only see in magazines. A world of marble floors imported from Italy, of chandeliers with crystals from Austria, of silence so expensive you could hear your own heartbeat echoing through halls designed to make you feel small. I grew up in one of the royal palaces in the Gulf, the third daughter of an emir whose name I cannot speak, in a country where even the sand seems to bow to power. My bedroom alone was larger than most people's homes. 47 rooms in that palace, and somehow, I felt trapped in every single one of them. I had servants who knew what tea I wanted before I knew I was thirsty. I had a closet full of Dior gowns I never wore because there was nowhere to go that wasn't already planned, monitored, and approved. I had everything money could buy except the one thing I desperately needed: permission to choose my own destiny. Have you ever felt like a prisoner in paradise? Have you ever stood in a room full of gold and felt absolutely hollow inside? That was my life. Every morning, I would wake up in silk sheets and stare at the ornate ceiling above my bed, counting the geometric patterns painted in real gold leaf while my soul screamed in silence. The Quran teaches that Allah provides everything we need, but I had everything and needed so much more. I performed my prayers 5 times a day, the ritual washing of hands, face, and feet before each prayer that Muslims must complete, but even as the water ran cold over my skin, I felt nothing inside. Just the motions. Just the routine. Just the emptiness dressed up as devotion. My father loved me, I think, in the way powerful men love their daughters, as chess pieces, as bargaining chips, as extensions of their legacy. I was educated at Oxford University, not because he valued my mind, but because an Oxford-educated daughter increased his international prestige. I could travel, yes, but always with security. I could study, yes, but my major was chosen for me. I could speak, yes, but my words were rehearsed. And then came the announcement that shattered whatever illusion of freedom I had left. 2 weeks before my 24th birthday, my father informed me that I would marry a Saudi prince. He was 54 years old. I had never met him. I had no choice in the matter. The wedding was already planned for 6 weeks away. I remember that moment with perfect clarity. We were in his private office, a room that smelled of oud wood and power. He didn't ask. He simply stated it as fact, the way you might announce the weather. My mother stood beside him, her eyes saying everything her mouth couldn't. This is your duty, this is your honor, this is the way things have always been. My younger sisters weren't even allowed in the room. I was the sacrifice that would secure another alliance, another business deal, another thread in the web of influence that royal families spend centuries weaving. I smiled. I nodded. I said, "Yes, father." Because that's what good daughters do. But inside, something broke. Or maybe something finally woke up. It was during my last term at Oxford, 3 months before that announcement, that I met Sarah. She was British, studying theology of all things, with hair the colour of autumn leaves and a laugh that sounded like freedom. We shared an apartment near the university, one of those old buildings with creaking floors and windows that never quite closed properly. I liked her immediately, though I couldn't explain why. She had this lightness about her, this peace that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside. She never pushed her faith on me, never preached, never tried to convert me. But I watched her. I watched how she prayed, not in ritual repetition, but in conversation, as if she were talking to someone who actually listened. I watched how she read this thick book with a worn leather cover, underlining passages and writing notes in the margins. I watched how she forgave easily, loved generously, and lived without the fear that had defined my entire existence. One night in November, she left that book on the coffee table in our shared living room. It was in English, Holy Bible. I knew about this book, of course. I knew it was forbidden. I knew that in my country, possessing one could lead to imprisonment or worse. I knew I should walk away. But I didn't. I picked it up. The leather was soft under my fingers, worn smooth by years of handling. I opened it randomly and read, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8 verse 32. I read it 3 times. Truth will set you free. Free. A word I'd heard 1,000 times but never truly understood until that moment. Could you walk away from a promise like that? Could you ignore words that seemed to reach into your chest and squeeze your heart? I couldn't. That night, after Sarah went to sleep, I took the Bible to my room. I started reading the Gospel of John by the light of my phone, volume on silent, door locked. I read about a man named Jesus who touched lepers when society said they were untouchable, who spoke to women when culture said they were beneath notice, who challenged religious leaders when power said they were above question, who died willingly when logic said he should save himself. And then I read that he rose again, that death itself couldn't hold him, that he conquered the grave and offered that same victory to anyone who believed. That I read until sunrise. And when the call to Fajr prayer, the pre-dawn prayer that Muslims perform before sunrise, echoed through Oxford's morning air, I didn't get up to pray. I kept reading. For the first time in my life, I had found something that felt more important than obligation. Over the next 2 months, I devoured that Bible. I read it in coffee shops, pretending to study. I read it in the library, hiding it inside my economics textbooks. I read it on the plane back home for winter break, the verses memorized in my mind because I couldn't risk carrying the physical book through customs. Every page felt like water in a desert I didn't know I was dying in. But it was the dream that changed everything. 3 weeks before my father announced my arranged marriage, I had a dream so vivid it felt more real than waking life. I was standing in a throne room, but not one I recognized. Everything was white, brilliantly white, the kind of light that should hurt your eyes but somehow didn't. And standing before me was a man in robes whiter than the light itself. He said my name. Holla. Not Princess Holla. Not my father's daughter. Just Holla. Like he knew me. Like he'd always known me. His eyes held oceans of love I'd never experienced, acceptance I'd never earned, and purpose I'd been desperately searching for. I know you, he said. And I love you. 3 simple sentences. But they unmade me completely. I fell to my knees, and even in the dream, I knew who he was. Jesus. The one I'd been reading about. The one who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. I woke up sobbing. My pillow was soaked with tears. The call to Fajr was echoing from the palace mosque. But I didn't pray the Islamic prayers that morning. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I talked to Jesus. Out loud. In my locked bedroom. Like Sarah did. Like the Bible described. If you're real, I whispered. I want to know you. Whatever the cost. Be careful what you pray for. God takes those prayers seriously. When I returned to the palace after Oxford, everything looked the same but felt different. The marble floors were still cold beneath my feet. The golden patterns on the ceiling still caught the light at sunset. The servants still anticipated my every need. But I was different. I had a secret burning inside me, a truth I couldn't unlearn, a love I couldn't unfeel. I downloaded a Bible app on my phone, buried in a folder labeled Language Studies, protected by 3 different passwords. Every night, after the palace quieted, after the last servant checked on me, after security completed their rounds, I would read by the dim light of my screen. I memorized verses. I prayed whispered prayers. I felt Jesus becoming more real to me than anything I could touch. But I was living a double life, and it was tearing me apart. During the day, I was the dutiful Muslim princess, attending Quran studies with my mother, participating in palace religious ceremonies, nodding along to discussions about Islamic law and tradition. During the night, I was becoming someone else entirely. Someone free. Someone loved. Someone who belonged to Jesus. Then came the announcement of my marriage. And I realized something with crystal clarity. I was running out of time. In 6 weeks, I would belong to a man I didn't know, in a marriage I didn't choose, living a lie I could no longer sustain. I needed to make a decision. A real one. The first real decision of my entire life. Through Sarah, who I'd stayed in contact with secretly, I connected with an underground church in my city. Yes, they exist. Hidden communities of believers meeting in basements and backrooms, expatriate Christians and secret converts, risking everything to worship the God they love. Sarah connected me with a woman named Grace, a British teacher working in my country, who led one of these house churches. I told Grace my situation. I told her about Jesus appearing in my dream. I told her about reading the Bible. I told her about the arranged marriage. And then I asked her the question that would change everything. Can you baptize me? Before I lose the chance forever. She was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but serious. Holla, do you understand what you're asking? Baptism isn't just a ritual. It's a public declaration that you belong to Jesus. In your situation, in your country, this could cost you everything. I know, I said. And I did. I knew about the apostasy laws. I knew about families who disowned converted daughters. I knew about the very real danger. But if I don't do this now, I'll spend the rest of my life living a lie. I'll marry a man who doesn't know me. I'll raise children in a religion I no longer believe. I'll die having never truly lived. Whatever it costs, it's worth it. Look inside your own heart right now. What would you be willing to lose to gain the truth? What would you be willing to sacrifice to find real freedom? Grace set the date, March 23, 2019. A Sunday evening. I told my security detail I was attending a women's charity event at a hotel, something I did occasionally for appearances. They drove me there, waited outside as usual. But I never went into that hotel. Grace was waiting in a car 3 blocks away. I slipped out a side entrance, changed my abaya for Western clothes in a public restroom, and got into her car with my heart hammering so hard I thought my chest might crack open. We drove to a house in an expatriate compound, one of those gated communities where Western workers lived, where security was focused on keeping threats out, not on watching what happened inside. The house belonged to a South African engineer and his wife. Their basement had been converted into a makeshift baptistry, a large inflatable pool, the kind children play in during summer, filled with cold water. There were 7 people there. Grace, the South African couple, 3 other believers I'd never met, whose names I never learned for their own protection, and me. We sang hymns in whispered voices. We prayed. And then Grace asked me the question I'd been waiting my whole life to answer. Holla, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he died for your sins, and that he rose again, conquering death so that you might have eternal life? I do, I said. And I meant it with every atom of my being. Then, based on your confession of faith, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The water was shockingly cold. It took my breath away as Grace lowered me backward into it. For 3 seconds, I was completely submerged. 3 seconds that felt like dying. 3 seconds that felt like being reborn. When I came up, gasping and laughing and crying all at once, I felt clean. Truly clean. Not the ritual purity of wuju, but something deeper. Something that washed the inside, not just the outside. I felt completely alive for the first time in my life. Completely free. Completely loved. Completely his. I had no idea that in 47 minutes, my heart would stop beating. The drive back was euphoric. I was still damp under my abaya, my hair wet against my neck, but I didn't care. I felt like I could fly. Like chains I didn't know I was wearing had just shattered. Grace dropped me 2 blocks from the hotel. I walked back, my security detail none the wiser, and we drove back to the palace in the usual silence. It was 7:32 p.m. when we arrived. I remember checking my phone. The palace was lit up for the evening, golden light spilling from every window. Servants were preparing dinner. My father was in his study. My mother was with my sisters. Everything was exactly as it always was. Except me. I was different. I was baptized. I was a Christian. I belonged to Jesus now, officially, publicly before witnesses and God himself. And nothing would ever be the same. I walked through the main entrance, past the security checkpoint where guards nodded respectfully, past the fountain in the central atrium with water that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year, past the portraits of my ancestors, stern-faced men and veiled women who had lived and died under the rule of Islam for generations. My feet echoed on the marble floor. That Italian marble, each tile cut and polished and shipped across the world at obscene expense. Cold even through my shoes. I was walking toward the main staircase, planning to go to my room, to pray, to thank Jesus properly for what he'd done. And then the world tilted. It happened so fast. One moment I was walking. The next, my vision went dark at the edges. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped steel bands around my ribs. I couldn't breathe. The cold marble floor rushed up to meet me. I heard someone scream. I didn't realize it was me. The impact should have hurt. The fall from standing height onto that unforgiving marble should have broken bones. But I didn't feel it. I didn't feel anything except a creeping coldness spreading from my chest outward, numbing everything it touched. I could hear voices. Frantic. Shouting. The princess. Someone get the doctor. Don't move her. What happened? I couldn't respond. Couldn't move. Couldn't open my eyes. The coldness had reached my fingertips, my toes, my face. And then it reached something deeper. Something essential. My heart stopped. I know it stopped because later, the palace physician, Dr. Rahman, a serious man trained at Johns Hopkins, would tell me exactly what he found when he arrived. No pulse. No respiration. Fixed and dilated pupils. Cyanosis, the medical term for when your lips and fingernails turn blue from lack of oxygen. He checked his watch. 7:39 p.m. He pronounced me dead. But I didn't know any of that then. In that moment, all I knew was darkness. Complete. Absolute. Darkness. And then I felt myself falling. Not physically. Spiritually. Falling through the darkness like Alice through the rabbit hole, except there was no bottom. Just endless falling through an absence of everything. No light. No sound. No sensation. Just awareness that I was falling and couldn't stop. Have you ever wondered what happens when you die? Have you ever considered that moment when your soul separates from your body? I was about to find out. I don't know how long I fell. Time didn't work the same way in that place. It could have been seconds. It could have been hours. But then, impossibly, in that absolute darkness, I saw light. Not approaching light. Not distant light. Just suddenly, light. Everywhere. Brilliant. Blinding. Beautiful. And in the center of that light stood Jesus. The same figure from my dream. The same white robes. The same eyes that held oceans. But this time, his expression was different. Urgent. Purposeful. He reached out his hand. Not yet, holla, he said. His voice resonated through that space, through the light, through me. I have plans for you. You cannot stay here. Go back. Go back and tell them what I've done. I don't want to go back, I heard myself say. Because in that moment, in his presence, I understood what Paul meant when he wrote that to live is Christ and to die is gain. Going back meant returning to the palace. To the arranged marriage. To the danger of exposure. To all the pain I'd just escaped. But Jesus smiled. And in that smile was something I couldn't refuse. Not command. Not manipulation. Just love. Pure love that knew me completely and chose me anyway. Trust me, he said. This is not your ending. This is your beginning. And then he touched my chest. Right where my heart had stopped. His finger was fire and ice simultaneously, pain and relief, death and life all at once. I gasped. In the palace, on that cold marble floor, surrounded by 12 security guards and Dr. Rahman, my body, which had been lifeless for 8 minutes, suddenly convulsed. My back arched. My mouth opened. And I drew in breath like thunder, a sound so loud and violent that 2 of the guards would later say they thought it was supernatural. That no human lungs could produce that sound. My eyes flew open. The crystal chandelier above me came into focus. Faces stared down at me. The guards. Dr. Rahman with his stethoscope still in hand. A servant with her hand over her mouth. All of them frozen in shock. Dr. Rahman checked his watch. 7:47 p.m. 8 minutes. I had been dead for 8 minutes. The first word that came out of my mouth was Jesus. I said it in English, not Arabic. I didn't mean to. It just came out. A confession. A testimony. A declaration. You should have seen their faces. The guards stumbled backward. Dr. Rahman dropped his stethoscope. One of the servants fainted. Because they all knew what they had just witnessed. They knew I was dead. They had seen the blue lips, the absent pulse, the fixed stare of death. They knew there was no medical explanation for what just happened. I sat up. By myself. No help. The dizziness I should have felt wasn't there. The weakness that should have accompanied oxygen deprivation wasn't there. I felt strong. Energized. Alive in a way that defied everything medical science teaches about cardiac arrest and brain death. Princess Holla. Dr. Rahman's voice was shaking. You had no pulse. You were. He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the word dead to a living person sitting upright and breathing normally. I looked around at the 12 guards. Some had fallen to their knees. Others had tears running down their faces. These were trained soldiers, men who had seen combat, who prided themselves on emotional control. And they were weeping because they had just witnessed a resurrection. I'm okay, I said. And I was. No pain. No confusion. No trauma. Just an overwhelming sense of purpose. Jesus had sent me back for a reason. He had raised me from the dead in front of witnesses who couldn't deny what they'd seen. This wasn't an accident. This was a testimony. Within minutes, the palace was in chaos. My father rushed down from his study. My mother and sisters came running from the family wing. Servants whispered in corners. Security immediately began reviewing footage from the cameras that covered every inch of that hallway. They watched me walk in, looking perfectly healthy. They watched me collapse. They watched me lie motionless for 8 minutes. They watched me sit up. The palace physician called for an ambulance anyway, insisted I needed to go to the hospital. But every test they ran came back normal. Perfect, actually. My heart rhythm was textbook. My oxygen levels were optimal. My brain showed no signs of oxygen deprivation. It was, as one of the doctors whispered when he thought I couldn't hear, medically impossible. My father demanded to know what happened. The guards told him what they saw. Dr. Rahman confirmed the absence of vital signs. The security footage showed the timeline. 8 minutes of death. And then life. But when my father asked me directly, "What happened to you?" I looked him in the eye and told him the truth. I died, I said. And Jesus brought me back. The silence that followed those words was deafening. My mother gasped. My sister's eyes went wide. My father's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then something much more dangerous, understanding. What did you say? His voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before storms. I said Jesus brought me back. I saw him, Father. He's real. And he has plans for my life that don't include that arranged marriage. I don't know where the courage came from. Maybe from the certainty that I had already died once and survived. Maybe from the memory of Jesus's touch still burning in my chest. Maybe from the simple fact that I had nothing left to lose because I had already lost everything that mattered. My old life, my old identity, my old religion. My father's face turned to stone. You will not speak that name in this house. That name just raised me from the dead in front of 12 witnesses. You can deny a lot of things, Father, but you can't deny what happened here tonight. What followed was the longest night of my life. My father called in the Imam, the Islamic religious leader who served our family. They tried to convince me I was confused, traumatized, influenced by my time in Britain. They suggested psychological evaluation. They threatened. They pleaded. They quoted the Quran. They reminded me of the penalty for apostasy, for leaving Islam in our country. But I had died. I had met Jesus face to face. I had been raised from death in front of witnesses who would never forget what they saw. How could I deny that? How could I pretend it didn't happen? I couldn't. And I wouldn't. Over the next 3 days, word spread through the palace despite my father's attempts to contain it. The servants talked. The guards talked. Even Dr. Rahman, bound by medical ethics and family loyalty, couldn't explain away what he'd witnessed. Some said it was a medical anomaly. Some said it was jinn, supernatural beings in Islamic theology, or evil spirits. Some said it was a test from Allah. But 3 of the guards knew better. Hassan, Omar, and Khalid. These 3 men who had stood closest to my body, who had seen the blue lips and the absent pulse, who had heard me gasp Jesus when I returned. They came to me separately, in secret, in the weeks that followed. And they each said some variation of the same thing. I can't unsee what I saw. If Jesus can bring you back from death, maybe he is who he says he is. Could you deny evidence that dramatic? Could you watch someone return from death and pretend it meant nothing? The arranged marriage was cancelled. Not because my father developed compassion, but because the Saudi prince heard rumors about the strange incident and decided I was either mentally unstable or cursed. Either way, not suitable for marriage. My father was furious. An alliance worth millions of dollars dissolved because his daughter had inconveniently died and come back to life proclaiming Jesus. But he couldn't kill me. Too many people knew what happened. Too many witnesses. The guards. The doctor. The servants. If I disappeared or died suspiciously after such a public miracle, questions would be asked. International attention might be drawn. My time at Oxford meant I had connections in the West. It was messy. Complicated. So instead, they found a different solution. 2 weeks after my resurrection, my father informed me that I would be sent abroad for psychiatric treatment. A facility in Switzerland, very private, very exclusive, where wealthy families sent problematic daughters. A golden cage in the Alps instead of the Gulf. But a cage nonetheless. Except I never made it to Switzerland. The plane had a layover in London. 3 hours at Heathrow Airport. I had 1 security guard with me, a young man named Ahmed who had been on duty the night I died. He had seen everything. In the airport bathroom, I looked at him and asked, "Do you believe what you saw that night was real?" He stared at me for a long moment. Then nodded. "I don't understand it. But yes. You were dead. And then you weren't. If I walked away right now, would you stop me?" Another long pause. Then, quietly, "No, princess. I don't think I would." I left through the main terminal. No running. No drama. Just a young woman in Western clothes walking through Heathrow Airport like thousands of others. Ahmed would later say I went to the bathroom and never came out, that he assumed I collapsed again, that by the time security broke down the door, I was gone. He would not be punished too severely. How can you punish someone for losing a woman who had already died and come back to life? The supernatural was now my shield. Sarah met me outside the airport. Grace had arranged emergency housing with a Christian organization that helps converts escape persecution. Within a week, I applied for religious asylum. Within a month, it was granted. The British government couldn't send me back to a country where I faced persecution for my faith, especially after 12 guards and a palace physician could testify to the circumstances of my conversion. I was free. Actually free. For the first time in my life. That was 6 years ago. Today, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in London. No marble floors. No golden ceilings. No servants. I work as a translator and I run an underground ministry reaching Muslim women in Gulf countries. We provide encrypted Bibles. We offer counseling. We create escape routes for those facing persecution. I've helped over 200 women in 6 years. Some wanted to convert. Some just wanted to escape abuse. Some needed both. And I helped them all because Jesus didn't raise me from death just to save myself. He raised me to help others find the life he offers. Hassan, Omar, and Khalid, the 3 guards who couldn't unsee my resurrection, they're Christians now. Secret believers still working in the palace, still serving my father, but serving a higher king in their hearts. They help us. They pass information. They protect other women who are waking up to the truth. The Saudi prince married someone else. My father replaced me with my younger sister in his political calculations. The palace moved on. Life continued as if I had never existed. But I know the truth. I know that on March 23, 2019, Jesus proved his power over death in front of 12 witnesses. I know that he kept his promise to use my life for his purposes. I know that every woman I help escape, every Bible I deliver, every prayer I pray, is part of the plan he showed me in that brilliant light. I traded a palace for a one-bedroom apartment. I traded silk sheets for IKEA furniture. I traded servants for doing my own laundry. I traded a title for anonymity. I traded material wealth for spiritual riches. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. Because no amount of gold can compare to freedom. No palace can compete with purpose. No earthly kingdom can match belonging to the kingdom of God. You're watching this video right now, and maybe you're thinking this is too dramatic to be true. Maybe you're skeptical. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating or lying or confused. That's okay. I understand. I would have thought the same thing before March 23, 2019. But 12 security guards can testify that I died. A palace physician can testify that I had no pulse for 8 minutes. Security cameras can show the timeline. Medical records can document the impossibility. These are facts. Verifiable. Undeniable. Witnesses who couldn't be bought or convinced to lie because what they saw shook them to their core. Jesus didn't just raise me from physical death that day. He raised me from a life of spiritual death that looked like paradise but felt like a tomb. He raised me from a golden cage into genuine freedom. He raised me from meaningless existence into purposeful living. If he can breathe life into a dead princess on a marble floor, he can breathe life into whatever dead situation you're facing today. If he can resurrect someone whose heart stopped for 8 minutes, he can resurrect your dead dreams, your dead relationships, your dead faith, your dead hope. The question is not whether Jesus can perform miracles. 12 security guards, a palace physician, and countless servants can testify that he can. The question is not whether he's powerful enough to change impossible situations. My own resurrection proves that he is. The real question, the only question that matters, is this: are you willing to die to your old life so he can raise you to a new one? Because that's what he's asking. Not tweaks. Not adjustments. Not minor improvements. He's asking you to die. To surrender. To let go of everything you're clinging to that's keeping you from him. Your reputation. Your comfort. Your plans. Your safety. Your golden cages. Whatever they look like in your life. It will cost you. It cost me everything I thought defined me. My family. My wealth. My status. My country. My very life, for 8 minutes on a marble floor, but what I gained was worth infinitely more. I gained Jesus. I gained freedom. I gained purpose. I gained life, real life, abundant life, the life he promised when he said, "I have come that they may have life, and have it to the fullest." You can have that life too. You don't have to be a princess. You don't have to die literally and come back. You don't have to escape a palace or flee a country. But you do have to make a choice. The same choice I made in that basement baptistry. The same choice I made every day since. Choose Jesus. Choose freedom. Choose life. Whatever the cost, it's worth it. I'm Holla. I died on March 23, 2019. And I've been more alive every day since than I ever was in 24 years of breathing in a palace. If Jesus can raise the dead, he can handle whatever impossible situation you're facing. The question is not his ability. The question is your willingness. Are you ready to die so you can truly live?